Alert adventurers! Putting secondary objectives into your combats can really help spice them up a bit, as it makes the party members have to decide whether or not to split focus and pursue whatever the secondary objective is, or maybe just the secondary objective changes the combat entirely and therefore the group has got to come up with a different way of having to deal with the situation themselves. So we're going to be going over a few different examples of secondary objectives that you can throw at your players during combat just to spice them up. So let's get into this. Yes, 'tis I, Nathaniel Gomezian, shopkeeper and proprietor of Gaming Treasure Chest. And as I said, today's video is all about secondary objectives that you can throw at your players that then forces them to have to think about how they're going to be strategically going through a combat situation, because sometimes combat can be a bit dull in terms of the fact it's literally just you just throwing numbers at each other until one beats one or the other beats the other, blah blah blah, just literally just a rolling dice throwing numbers and being does this hit, okay, this hits, here's the damage kind of thing. And while that is okay in most situations, sometimes if you keep doing it that way, the combats can be a bit stale. Now, don't get me wrong, you can throw in dialogue that can zhuzh up a combat as well, but these kind of secondary objectives just force the players to have to decide on a different strategy, or in mid-combat, forces them to have to react to what's happening. Because let's throw a terrible analogy out there. Let's say that there was a warehouse, there was just an open warehouse that had people in it, and a fire got set in one of the corners. You can pretty much accurately work out what those people's movements will be in terms of they will just be running to the exit away from the fire. But if you threw in little extra things in there, then you might not be able to predict those people's movements as easily. Let's maybe say that there's an office in there of an open safe that's got jewels in it, or maybe there's a fire extinguisher or a hose or something along those lines. So you might get some people who are during the panic of what's going on with the fire might be thinking, the safe is open over there with the jewels in it. I might sneak in there and quickly grab some jewels before I run to safety, and during the panic of it all. Or as I said, there's a fire extinguisher. You might have some people who try to be heroic and try to grab that to try to put out the fire. So by putting secondary objectives in, it's kind of that, where it makes it less obvious to predict what people and your players will do in the situations. I do hope that terrible analogy helped in some way. Secondary objectives can just help to make a combat a little bit more memorable, and as I said, to force, maybe if they've got a specific way that they normally tackle combats, this might throw a spanner in the works. It has to force them to come up with a workaround that's slightly different than what the party normally does. And that's just fun, just to see how they're going to react and what they're going to do about it. And in today's video, I'm going to be going through 5 different secondary objectives that you can throw into more or less most combat situations. That's going to be interesting. So let's get into the first one. So the first secondary objective that you can throw at your players during a combat that you can fit into most different combats depending on what the situation is hostages. And there's a number of different ways that you can go about this. So you can either do it that if you're on a town square or a pub or tavern or some kind of fancy gala, then maybe the bad guys actually grab some members of the public and hold them hostage during the combat, which then forces your players to have to come up with, okay, right, we can't just go about this our normal way of just hack and slash, because maybe people might die, hostages might die, and most of the time your players might want to try to avoid that. I mean, of course you might just have players who are solid, enough talk, and I'm just going to go in there with my axe and go straight through the hostage into the person because I'm killing these people no matter what. And obviously I said you can get players like this, but that's going to be interesting to see what the effects of them killing the hostages are. So the other way that you can use hostages during a combat is that maybe as your players have entered whatever this place is, maybe it's actually the villain's lair, or it's a gang's lair or something along those lines. Maybe there are cages that have got hostages or civilians or whatnot in it that they've captured. Maybe if it's a cult or something, maybe they were doing sacrifices. Whatever the reason that they've got these people imprisoned, as the combat is kicking off, maybe they start to think, okay, we're going to be losing this. So maybe the cult leader or gang leader or whoever it is decides to tell some of the enemies, right, kill the hostages kind of thing. So they send a small parcel of the members to go and kill some of the people in the cages, and then that kind of forces your players to think, okay, right, we can fight the people that we're currently fighting who are in front of us, or we can try to get past some of them, or some of us can try to get past some of them to attack the people who are going to be trying to kill the hostages, and therefore like it forces them during that combat situation to, okay, we've got to decide what's going on here, whether or not, as I said, to fight the people who are in front of us, and maybe some hostages might die, maybe we'll beat these people and then be able to kill the people who are trying to kill the hostages, or stop the people who are trying to kill the hostages, or, as I said, like it forces them like to make that kind of moral quandary of what they want to do. In some situations here, some parties might split focus, like some people might stay and fight like the main group of people who are fighting them, and send maybe a member or two to try and stop the people who are trying to kill the hostages. As I said, it's just something which just like spices up that combat, and it makes the players have to make those decisions which are crucial in the moment when they've only got like a few moments to think, because obviously, as I said, if they take too long, it might be too late before they react, kind of thing. So just a fun one that you can throw at them. So let's get on to the next one. So another secondary objective that you can throw at your players is maybe they've turned up at like, you know, the bad enemies like lair kind of thing, or maybe they've fought their way through and they've got to like the end chamber, and there's a ritual happening, like in terms of the fact like there's a couple of them, like also could be cultists or whoever, like chanting and whatnot, and there's like maybe like runes lighting up, or it can be like candles snuffing out, and basically they send like cultists or whatever the enemy is to fight the players, but there is also the ritual going on behind that. So obviously what you can do with this is that at the end of each like combat round, have something which indicates to your players that like there is a ritual which is currently going down, that if it is successful might be not very good for the world or them in the situation that they're in. And so you can do that by, as I said, maybe there are runes that at the end of each round of combat, runes are lighting up, and there's like a certain amount of runes that they can see. So maybe there's like, you know, 4 runes. At the end of one round of combat, one of the runes lights up. End of the next round of combat, another rune lights up. And so they kind of can put together in their head that as each round of combat is going on, these runes are lighting up, and if all of the runes light up, then as I said, something terrible might happen. Some big bad might get summoned into this world, an elder god or something along those lines. And so obviously they kind of want to stop that from happening. You can also do this with like flames or candles if you want to, whereby, as I said, like maybe 5 or so candles or braziers that are lit in this kind of ritual circle, and yet again at the end of each round of combat, maybe one of those flames is going out or lighting up, depending on which way you want to do this. And so the players know that once all the flames go out, or once all the flames are lit, then yet again something is going to be going down. So this yet again forces your players to think, okay, right, do we just fight the people who are trying to stop us here, or do we have to break through and get to stop what is happening here? Because as I said, like, you know, rituals can sometimes lead to very bad things potentially happening to the world as well as the party. So it can be a very fun secondary objective, which like yet again forces the players to have to react, otherwise like, you know, things could go terribly wrong. Anyway, on to the next one. So this secondary objective that you can throw at your players is all to do with like items, or maybe like a treasure or a relic that the players are like really wanting to like keep hold of or not wanting to lose kind of thing. And this can kind of happen like maybe on a ship or an airship, or even like, you know, carriages or something along those lines, whereby a hole has been created in the side of the ship, maybe like through combat that's going on. As I said, like this can be at sea where like they're on a vessel in the ocean, or it can be a sky ship, and as I said, can be a carriage, whereby there is a relic or treasure or something which is starting to turn by turn make its way closer to whatever this hole is, and maybe falling through and potentially being lost forever. If it turns out that it's like on a sky ship and that this relic or treasure or whatnot is about to fall out of it, then it could be really hard to locate where the hell that has fallen down into, or if it's going to fall down into the ocean floor. They might have an idea about where it is in terms of like the ocean floor kind of thing. But then the party have then got to try and make their way to try and get that, which I said like can lead on to like an interesting adventure in itself if they're trying to find the relic again or treasure or whatever it is. And as I said, you could do this in a carriage as well, whereby like maybe like there's a carriage fight going on, and yet again there's a hole that's appeared in the side of the carriage, and this relic or whatnot is slowly but surely, like, because maybe it's like tilted, like the carriage slightly in this combat, it's rocking from side to side, and the relic is about to, like, to fall out onto the road kind of thing. And then this forces the players to have to decide to split focus, and maybe one of them goes to rescue the relic or treasure or whatnot. Otherwise, it's going to end up potentially being lost, or forcing them to have to go down another quest kind of thing to be acquired, like the relic or treasure or whatever it is that potentially could be slipping through their fingers as combat is currently going on. So it's just forcing them to split focus, and like I said, maybe one of them or so goes to go get it, or maybe a mage hand tries to grab it or something like that. But it's forcing them to have to make other decisions other than just hitting the bad guys, basically. And of course, in that situation, maybe one of the people on the enemy team is also trying to grab the treasure or whatnot and stop it from falling, and they're trying to take it for themselves. So again, it's forcing them to have to decide whether or not to try and gain the treasure and stop it from falling for themselves, or if it's going to get lost to the enemy as well, kind of thing. That's another way that you can kind of play it if you want to. Anyway, on to the next one. So another secondary objective you can throw at your players that can be in an alleyway or somewhere on the streets, or wherever it kind of makes sense, is to throw in a chase. And by that I mean maybe the big bad or one of the enemy members tells another one go get help, or to take an item and run away, make sure you get as far away from the heroes as possible kind of thing. Or I said, it could just be maybe the big bad trying to get away. So what you have here is a group of enemies, most of them staying to fight, but sending one of them off to, as I said, either get more help or to take an item elsewhere and whatnot. And so yet again, this is now forcing your players to have to decide, okay, do we stay in this big combat, or does one or two of them try to rush through all these people who are currently trying to stop them and initiate a chase sequence whereby they're trying to get the enemy who is trying to run away. Now, interestingly enough, there are actually rules which go with a chase in terms of if you're running and you're using your action to dash, and you do that a certain number of times. I believe it's 3 times you're allowed to do it, and then if you start doing it past that, then you've got to roll. I can't remember if it's a constitution or something, but you've got to be able to roll to be able to keep on dashing, because basically you're becoming exhausted by continuously chasing these people. Now, admittedly, the enemy is going to have that as well, but it depends on what kind of abilities the enemy has and what kind of abilities you have, whether or not they're a monk or you're a monk, and obviously you can use things like key points for step of the wind or whatnot to be able to dash even more, or then use your bonus action as a dash and whatnot. So if you're a rogue and stuff, there's different ways that you can have it that these people can try to be running away, and it's forcing the players then have to chase them. And obviously you can use certain spells and whatnot, like hold person, to try and stop somebody from running away as well. So see, again, it's forcing the players to have to make these decisions in time pressure situations. Now obviously they can just do the combat with the people that they've got in front of them, and then try to track down and investigate and try to follow the person who is running away. Of course you can go down that route as well if that's what the players decide to do, if they don't want to give chase and just want to do that. But of course the idea is that you're giving them the choice about what they want to do in the combat situation, as I said, and whether or not they decide to pursue the chase or not. As I said, they can try to investigate afterwards to try and find where the person went and whatnot, and like I said, if they've taken a particular item or whatnot, or if they've gone for help. As I said, if the players have decided to stay in this combat, maybe the combat gets even more crazier as more reinforcements come in for the enemies, because they chose not to go after the person who was going for help and whatnot. So you can go about either way kind of thing. So I said, there are consequences to the actions, I said, depending on what the players decide to do. And I said, if they're trying to chase them because they've got an item, then investigating and such is another way that you can go about it. And that just makes an interesting quest line in itself as well. So it kind of works either way. But anyway, on to the last one. So the 5th and final kind of secondary objective that you can throw at your players is quite a simple one. Fire! Setting a fire, especially in a room which has got loads of maybe books or journals. If the players have yet again I said stumbled onto the bad guy's lair, or they've they're in a wizard's tower or whatnot, and they've got their evil plans and such, and the players have made their way in, then maybe I said a group member or an enemy decides, okay, crap, we can't let the people know what's going on. If they've got big plans for destroying the world, or like certain things that they're trying to do, like objectives that are written down that can then just like gain access to all the players to know and be able to potentially stop their plans. Of course they're going to want that not to see the light of day for the players, so maybe they fireball the room and therefore like setting it on fire, and now the players have got to decide whether or not to continue on with combat as normal or to actually try to put out the fire, because maybe there's like important information that's currently burning at this moment in time that could be like crucial to what they're trying to do, and so they're then gonna have to try to stop and stop the fire. Or maybe they've set the orphanage on fire or something like that, and like obviously it's splitting the players' attention in terms of maybe they want to put out the fire to rescue people if there are innocents or civilians or whatever that have been in a building that's been set on fire as well. Like it's forcing them to do they continue with the combat as is, or do they split focus and maybe some of them continue with the combat and some of them try to put the fire out to save people, as well as I said, if it's information. I did this and actually it ended up being quite funny because my players said afterwards that it was one of the most scariest things to them. So what happened for me was that my players came in on these cultists where it was kind of their lair, and as they came in, they started beating up cultists, and one of the cultists came in and was like, shit, the master's not gonna like this, and so he then turned around and fireballed the room behind them, and that scared the players because fireball is such a powerful spell and whatnot. For that person not to use it on the players meant that there must have been something significantly important in that room that they didn't want to get exposed, because especially when they said oh, the master's not gonna like this. So that then actually made the players be like, okay, maybe there's something important in there, and they kind of in that combat tried to get past to be able to start putting the fire out in the room as well as the combat that was going on, because there was potentially important information in there. Now admittedly, like I said, they didn't manage to put out the fire in time, so there was information that they could have got that could have helped. Obviously, I said you don't want to if it's important information which they're gonna need for the campaign, you don't want to be burning that because they are gonna need that going forward. But if it's stuff that's gonna be little hints and things that are gonna be just to help them later on, it's not important and crucial to the story, then burning stuff like that can be a really fun way of giving them the option to maybe save that. But also, I said, if they lose it, then through their decisions of maybe deciding not to put out the fire is a fun way to go about it. So that's just my 5 examples of secondary objectives that you can throw during combat just to spice them up. There are numerous other things that you can do as well, and I probably will do another video, maybe more videos on this, just because there's so many things that you could do to help spice up combats and just don't make it such just a slogfest of just throwing numbers at each other kind of thing. It just makes them more interesting and memorable. Obviously, you can throw dialogues and whatnot in there as well, as I previously said, but it's just a little bit more fun that just forces the players to have to think a little bit more about the combats that they're currently in. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did and want to see more things like your D&D and such, then why not consider hitting the subscribe button, liking the video, leaving a comment, doing all the YouTubey things to help the algorithm with this little man's dream of trying to make this a thing. Also, there is the Discord server that if you want to join that, I want to make it a lovely place where people can talk Dungeons and Dragons, potentially find games and just have good times together. So if you want to join the Discord, please feel free to. Link is down below. Also, if you can and want to support the channel financially, there is the Patreon, which there is the link down below, as well as the Etsy store of Gaming Treasure Chest, where you can get items that I have designed and 3D printed to send to you, all with a D&D kind of theme, be it dice holders, dice rollers and such. So considering the fact that it's Christmas and maybe you're looking for a gift for somebody, the option is there, but do not feel forced. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Hope you had a great day, and until next time, goodbye.